Hello again, and thank you for joining us for this May 15th edition, Sunday, May 15th, 2022 edition of Alaska Weather. I'm David Percy. Up first on the, river breakup chart, still some mostly areas of mostly ice there on the lower Yukon River, and then it kind of opens up a little bit more there across the delta. And no watches or warnings out along those interior rivers, except for the Glen Ellen area. Otherwise, up to the north, Koyukuk River has quite a few stretches, mostly open water there. And then the Noatak River also has starting to increase the areas of some open water, some open areas there, as you can see. And the Kobuk River, though, still pretty much solid. And then in the North Slope rivers, Sag River has a little area there of some open up toward the Alaska Range. Otherwise, the Colville River and then that shorter one in between the two that I forgot the name of, they're still solid ice. And moving on to hazardous weather graphic, actually the red area there, that's the flood warning that continues in the Glen Allen area north of the Glen Highway, and that's out through Tuesday. Due to continued snowmelt flooding caused by snowmelt, not precipitation or any ice jams, just the melting snow from the winter. And flooding continues on Moose Creek and the surrounding areas. And again, that's out through Tuesday. For satellite imagery, you can see clouds over the eastern interior actually shifting in. Actually, they were over in the Yukon area yesterday, and have been working their way westward. A few showers there with that, and actually down along the North Gulf Coast, Cordova picked up about 1/4 of an inch of rain. Otherwise, we've got a weak system spreading some rain up into the southern southeast coast there. Very weak, not winds not really a factor at all with that. And now to the west, we got strong area of high pressure over the western Bering Sea. And you can see south to north flow, pretty strong jet from north to south, up to about 120 knots there, pulling surges of moisture southward. That kind of sheared, the front was coming eastward there yesterday across the Russian Far East. I got in the Bering Strait coast, and then that northerly wind kind of shearing it apart, one big surge going southward there across the Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians, and on some pretty gusty winds even at the surface, 40-mile-an-hour gusts at St. Paul. And 35 to 45 mile an hour gusts for the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula today, and then lighter winds up to the north. But they're kind of an extensive area of precipitation with that. 1/4 of an inch of rain fell at Nome, St. Mary's, Marshall, Bethel, Cold Bay, all in the last 12 hours there. With that, starting to taper off this afternoon there. With the bulk of the moisture appears to be over the farther to the west there. A lot of sunshine over the Bristol Bay area, south central Alaska, into the Matanuska-Susitna Valley, Kenai Peninsula. Allowing temperatures to rise into the 50s, well into the 50s in some cases there. Also up over the Tanana Valley, mid-50s, not uncommon in those locations. And some light snow on the western Arctic coast, but it amounts very light, more of a snow shower flurry condition there down to the Seward Peninsula. And then the light rain spreading in over the southern panhandle, gradually shifting up to the north. And kind of a showery day, as I mentioned, Cordova seeing some rain, kind of isolated there right over Cordova. About 1/4 of an inch falling there. And also scattered showers over the eastern Copper River Basin up into the upper Tanana Valley. For tonight, you can see high pressure holds there over the southwest Bering Sea, north of the western Aleutians, or actually north of Amchitka Island. And it ridges right up into the Chukchi Sea. north of the Russian coast there, and a couple of troughs coming over the top of that, and actually leftover moisture keeps snow showers, Seward Peninsula, areas of light snow, chances for the western North Slope and the central and western Arctic coast, and still some possibility some light snow and lower flying conditions there, eastern Arctic coast toward Kaktovik, into the Mackenzie Delta Bay area there with that 1010 millibar low. Otherwise, overnight tonight, look for mostly cloudy skies with scattered showers over the area from the Yukon River right on down to the Alaska Range. Maybe some shower activity of an isolated nature over the Talkeetnas, but basically dry, variably cloudy for southern Alaska. Most of the clearing will be to the west there. And periods of light rain continue, and actually tries to work a little farther to the north, probably increasing shower conditions for Juneau up toward Haines, Skagway, and Elephant Cove, in those areas. And also another surge of moisture keeps it unsettled there for the Alaska Peninsula. A little on the breezy side too, 20 to 30 mile an hour wind gusts. So coming down a little bit there. And then going to tomorrow, a little breezy over the western interior, looking at north to northwest winds anywhere from 15 to 25 miles an hour, the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, down across the Alaska Peninsula. And another low center starting to approach the southeast coast may increase the rain chances late in the day there on the central and south coast, otherwise kind of showery for the north coast. Showers once again, Copper River Basin, especially over the mountains, Wrangell Mountains, Alaska Range, some of that spilling into the 40-mile country, but nothing heavy. And look for some gusty wind conditions, eastern North Slope and the Arctic coast with that trough, and again, cloudy skies, flurries, or snow showers, but nothing significant there. And again, high pressure holding out over the western Bering Sea. That shifts eastward, starts to move eastward there. And actually, later in the week, we'll move in over mainland Alaska. That should help kill the shower threat that continues tomorrow, though, for Tuesday. Got low pressure there near Dawson, and a couple of troughs extending from that keep the shower chances and clouds in over the southeast interior areas. Could be a little more numerous on the shower activity for the eastern Copper River Basin up into Nabesna, Northway Tok, down to Yakutat. And then more rain moves into the southern southeast coast. Winds might pick up a little bit more. Looks like small craft advisory level winds coming in from the east-southeast for the south coast, and even Clarence Strait there, looking at small craft advisory winds. Otherwise, pretty nice conditions, mostly sunny from the Alaska Peninsula, less wind out that way. Right up through the western interior. Probably some partly sunny skies, Cook Inlet and the Kenai Peninsula, Madawaska-Susitna Valley, and dry with light winds for the North Slope Arctic coast and northeast interior. Front tries to bring some light rain into the Shimiatu area, but that high pressure area really depends how far east that gets, depending on how far east the high decides to move. Anyway, for lows tonight, in the teens for the North Slope on out to the Arctic coast, and 20s for the Brooks Range, although that 13 for Anatuvik Pass there. Upper 20s to mid 30s for much of interior Alaska, mid 20s for the St. Lawrence Island area, upper 20s for the Pribilofs, and otherwise upper 30s to near 40, Kodiak Island, South Central Alaska, lower 40s though for the Panhandle. Highs tomorrow, upper 40s to lower 50s for the southeast coast, and call it mid to upper 50s or even lower 60s for South Central Alaska. Talkeetna, Trapper Creek, some of those areas might push into the lower 60s around Big Lake, for example, like today, and 55 to 62 for Bristol Bay. 20s, lower to mid for the Arctic coast, except 30 over toward Kaktovik, and near freezing for the high tomorrow for St. Lawrence Island at Gamble, Savunga, upper 30s for the Pribilofs, and well into the 40s over the Aleutians, and 45 to 50 for the Alaska Peninsula, mid-50s for Kodiak. Lows on Tuesday morning, 5 to 15 for the North Slope and the Arctic coast, with 20s into the Brooks Range, and just to the south, otherwise upper 20s to lower 30s for much of interior Alaska. South and east of the Alaska Range, Bristol Bay, looking at upper 30s to lower 40s, Kodiak Island, 30s for the Aleutians, and 30s to lower 40s for the Panhandle. Highs on Tuesday afternoon, lower to mid 50s for the southeast coast, and 55 to 62 again, South Central Alaska. Mid to upper 50s in the central interior, and in the 20s for the Arctic coast and the North Slope.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
First line weather graphic Monday morning. A lot of IFR out over the Bering Sea, and some of that extends up to the Yukon Delta coast. IFR Seward Peninsula up to Buckland, and also for the Brooks Range out to the North Slope and the eastern Arctic coast. VFR over the western interior from the Kobuk-Koyukuk Valley southward into Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island, Cook Inlet, Kenai Peninsula, marginal VFR, Copper River Basin, some possible IFR in the Upper Tanana Valley, otherwise the Panhandle, marginal VFR. And for the afternoon, IFR there along the Brooks Range, maybe to the eastern Arctic coast, otherwise marginal VFR now for the remainder of the North Slope and Arctic coast, with a little bit of marginal VFR down into the eastern Koyukuk Valley, and mostly VFR northern Bering Sea, on down the west coast there to Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island. Some marginal VFR, eastern Copper River Basin to the eastern Alaska Range. That area extends down across the southeast coast. Big area of IFR over the south central Bering Sea into the central and western Aleutians, with marginal VFR eastward across the Fox Islands to the Alaska Peninsula. For Tuesday morning, IFR central and southwest Bering Sea, as well as the central and western Aleutians, and some marginal VFR with areas of IFR for the Fox Islands, Alaska Peninsula. Pribilofs right on the edge of the VFR zone there that extends eastward right up to the west coast, northward to St. Lawrence Island, Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island, Kenai Peninsula, Cook Inlet. Marginal VFR, Prince William Sound extending into at least possibly Girdwood, and in the Matanuska Valley, some IFR over the Copper River Basin, but marginal VFR up the eastern interior expands as you head across the Yukon Flats to the Brooks Range, with IFR for the North Slope and eastern Arctic coast, and marginal VFR, some scattered areas of IFR for the Panhandle. And for the afternoon, marginal VFR with some scattered areas of VFR for the southeast coast, as well as the North Gulf Coast, Copper River Basin, and some marginal VFR along the western Alaska Range there on up to Windy Pass. But interior VFR, the entire stretch of the Yukon, Kuskokwim River Valley areas right out to the southwest coast. In fact, VFR all the way out to the Pribilof Islands. Marginal VFR with some scattered VFR for the Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians. It looks like pretty solid IFR there from Matka Island westward and northward to St. Matthew Island. North Slope and Arctic coast, marginal VFR. Passes Anatuvik, marginal at times tomorrow, and Adigan, marginal VFR. Both north entrances of both Anatuvik and Adigan could see some IFR, especially early on. And for Lake Clark and Merrill, good VFR day coming up. Same thing for rainy VFR. Windy, marginal VFR, and then becoming VFR. Isabel, though, VFR the entire day optimistically, but Mentesta kind of in the marginal VFR zone. And Tanita, VFR. Portage, VFR. Chilkoot and White, marginal. Looking at the freezing levels, again, very warm air mass with upper level ridging out over the western Bering Sea. So we've got 10,000 feet right up into the Russian Far East. Quite a gradient there across the east central Bering, coming down to 2,000 feet along the southwest coast, and roughly 2,000 to 3,000 feet covering much of mainland Alaska and the Gulf. Icing. Isolated moderate between 5,000 and 12,000 feet over the southeast coast and eastern North Gulf coast, and possible icing, mixed icing, 2,000 to 8,000 feet. It'll be light, though, for the Brooks Range out to the North Slope and eastern Arctic coast. Jet stream, upper trough right over the central interior, and another upper low approaching the southeast coast. Then big area high pressure out over the western Bering Sea, ridging into the Russian Far East. So northerly flow between those two features, 100 to 115 knots right across the western interior and the Alaska Peninsula, with 9,000 feet, strongest wind flow, a little bit shifted to the west of the 33,000 foot wind maxes, but about 40 to 45 knots out of the north. Overall pattern the same. 3,000 feet, northerlies up to 40 knots over the western Brooks Range in toward the Noatak Valley area, and then 20 to 30 knots on to the south, and high pressure over the western Bering Sea, low pressure over the eastern and central interior, making for light wind conditions, a little breezy there along the southern panhandle, so that could result in moderate chop there, and isolated moderate across western Alaska to the Alaska Peninsula.
So that Galena flood back in 2013 was at the intersection of weather and climate. Rick, I often get questions about the difference between weather and climate. How do you distinguish between the two?
Well, that's a really good question, John. One of the analogies that I like to use, the wardrobe analogy. So in my closet, in my dresser, I've got clothes appropriate for 90-degree weather and 50 below weather. That's the climate part of my wardrobe. But what I'm going to put on today, am I going to wear my Hawaiian shirt because it's going to be a hot July day, or am I going to wear my bunny boots because it's going to be 50 below? That's the weather part of my wardrobe.
You know, there's another interesting analogy. I've heard it said that climate is like your personality, whereas weather is like the mood you're in today. It's like that old John Denver song. Some days are diamonds and some days are stones. That's how weather works.
Of course, it's really a continuous range. Just as the Galena ice jam flooding was the result of a weather event, that ice jam, up against that cold spring, a climate event. So too with less impactful events. For instance, a daily record high temperature is a weather event, one day's high. But we put that in a climate context, say comparing to a century or more of individual temperatures on a given date.
So these extreme events like record high temperatures also happen on the seasonal time scale. Just in the last few years, we've had what was called a marine heat wave in the waters south of Alaska, the Gulf of Alaska and the Bering Sea. But the water temperatures in that area set new records in 2015 and 2016.
And most Alaskans are acutely aware that big wildfire seasons are becoming more and more common, most recently in 2015. And the frequency of million-acre seasons has doubled since the early 1990s.
Just this past winter, we had another event in the Bering Sea. The ice extent in the Bering was lower than it had ever been in the last 150 years. That's about as far back as the good records go. There'd never been another year like this one in the Bering with so little sea ice. That had major impacts on the communities along the west coast and the northwest coast.
So, John, what have you been hearing from folks around town about these kind of climate extremes?
I've heard from a number of people who've been here a long time that winters just aren't what they used to be. The average temperatures are higher than they were back in the 1960s and 1970s, and we just don't get the extreme cold days, the days down in the minus 50s or even the minus 60s that we used to experience in Fairbanks back in the 1960s, 1970s, and even into the 1980s.
Well, and it's not just winter either. 2016 and 2017, the summers brought unusually muggy, humid weather to Fairbanks. We're not used to thinking of that in interior Alaska, but record high humidities during the summer months. As in the winter, we've had a significant increase in freezing rain events, since about 2000. So much so that DOT has changed their road treatment strategy, and now we have the school district building in winter rain days into the calendar. And of course, we all need good weather forecasts for these high impact weather events.
We know, though, that weather forecasts are sometimes wrong just 3 or 4 days in advance. So if these weather forecasts and the models they're based on can't pick up events like freezing rain 3 or 4 days ahead, how can we believe what they say about climate for the future?
Well, that's a really good question, John. And I think the important thing to remember is that parts of the system are predictable.
So climate models can't give you weather for particular days or even for particular months or years. They actually predict averages. These are averages over periods of a decade or two, or even averages over periods of several years. So they don't give us the month-to-month information that we might want. What are they telling us about the future, though?
Well, these climate models are telling us on the decades-long time frames that warmer winters are going to become more common. We're going to have more frequent, very low sea ice years with late freeze up and early meltout. And the same will be true on Alaskan rivers. We'll have more frequent seasons when freeze up is late and break up is early.
One of the other common threads in these climate model predictions is that heavy rain events and heavy snow events will become more common in the future. That's actually a prediction that the models make for mid-latitudes as well as for high latitudes in areas like Alaska. So we can expect the heavy downpours to become heavier and the heavy winter snows to become heavier than we've been used to. They're also predicting more frequent freezing rain events, getting back to what you talked about earlier. These events that might have happened just once every year or two in the past could actually end up happening several times in a winter in the future, according to the climate models.
And it is important to remember that even in a warming world, there are still going to be seasons and years that are colder than the average, but these cold seasons will become less and less common. So, John, maybe I don't need to have those bunny boots in my closet anymore?
Well, at least you won't need to wear them as often as you did in the past.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Coastal water forecasts for the south coast of the Panhandle. Small craft advisories for southeast winds on Monday at 25 knots, seas around 10 feet. And same forecast for Clarence Strait, 25 knot southeast winds and 10-foot seas. Stevens Passage, southeast winds 20 knots with higher gusts. North coast, lighter winds, southeast 15 to 20 knots. Lincoln Island Glacier Bay, afternoon winds of 25 knots from the south. And moving ahead to Tuesday, south coast, still small craft advisories, southeast winds at 25 knots. And the north coast, picking up a little bit, easterlies 20 to 25 knots. And for Clarence Strait, south winds at 20 knots, southeast 10 for Stevens Passage. And Lincoln Island Glacier Bay, northern inside waters, north at 15. Prince William Sound, northwest winds 15 knots for Monday with seas at 3 feet. And around Middleton Island, eastern North Gulf Coast, winds will be southeast of 15 knots with 4-foot seas. But the western North Gulf Coast, pretty light and variable wind conditions tomorrow with the seas laying down to 3 feet. Cook Inlet, north winds 15 knots. Kamishak Bay and the Barren Islands, looking at northwest winds at 20 knots with 5-foot seas. Tuesday, Cook Inlet, variable winds in the morning become southwest at 10 in the afternoon with seas around 3 feet. Light variable winds for Kamishak Bay, the Barren Islands, and the western North Gulf Coast, all variable at 10 knots, seas 2 to 5 feet. Prince William Sound, variable to south breeze at 10 knots with 2-foot seas, and eastern North Gulf Coast east at 15. Kodiak Island, west-northwest winds 15 knots, seas 3 feet. Alaska Peninsula, north to northwest winds at 20 to 25 knots, and Bristol Bay, southwest or northwest winds at 20 knots. Outlook for Tuesday: Bristol Bay, northwest winds 15 knots with 5-foot seas. Alaska Peninsula, northwesterlies at 20 knots with seas up to 6 feet. And Kodiak Island, light variable winds in the forecast for Tuesday with seas running 2 to 4 feet. And for the eastern Aleutians for Monday, small craft advisories, north winds 25 knots, seas 7 to 9 feet. Adak and Atka, north winds 20 knots, 6-foot seas. Amchitka Island, northeast at 20, and Kiska to Shemya, southeast 15. And no change from Shemya to Kiska on Tuesday. Southeast winds 15 knots, seas at about 5 feet. Adak and Atka, variable to east winds 10 to 15 knots. And for the Fox Islands, looks like north to northeast winds 15 to 25 knots with seas 4 to 6 feet. And for the southwest coast, north to northwest winds 25 knots, seas at about 6 feet. Small craft advisories for the Pribilof Islands, north winds 25 knots. St. Matthew Island, north at about 20. And St. Lawrence Island, small craft advisories, north winds 25 knots. Norton Sound, north winds at 20. North winds 20 knots for Norton Sound on Tuesday, but seasonally around 2 feet. And lighter winds for St. Lawrence Island, north at 15, and the southwest coast, northwest 15 to 25 knot winds in the forecast. Pribilofs north at 15, and west winds 15 knots for St. Matthew Island. And going up north to the Arctic coast, looks like the east central coast there, brisk wind advisories, winds north tomorrow at 25 knots. And Kaktovik to Demarcation Point into McKenzie Bay area, northwest of 15. Central coast zone, north winds 20 knots, back down to 15 on the western Arctic coast, north winds 15. And then brisk wind advisories from Cape Thompson to Wales for north winds at 25 knots. And for Tuesday, Wales to Cape Thompson, light north winds at 10 knots. Cape Thompson up to, say, Point Ley, call it east at 15. Central Arctic coast east at 10. And for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, pretty light winds now from the north and northeast at about 10 knots. For tonight, a couple of disturbances. One pushing slowly eastward with some snow, light snow, flurries, fog, clouds, western north slope and into the central Arctic coast, and the other one kind of exiting the area there. But scattered showers all the way down to the Alaska Range, and periods of light rain over the southern panhandle slowly moves northward, and some showers over the Alaska Peninsula and eastern Aleutians. And for Monday, mostly sunny skies, southern Alaska, the western interior, some snow chances on the eastern Arctic coast, and drying out over the southern panhandle, scattered showers over the eastern Copper River Basin. Moving ahead to Tuesday, high pressure kind of shifts eastward over the southern Bering Sea, but continues to control the area out there and keeps the western part of the state dry.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.